Hi, this is Dr. Nick. I'm the Incrementalist here with Incremental Insights for better business, better health.
And I'm Fred Goldstein with Accountable Health, here helping employers, health plans, and healthcare systems with their population health improvement programs. And we are now at episode 100, Dr. Nick. Unbelievable. An incredible period of time to do this, obviously, and an incredible number of episodes. So I think in this one, what we really want to try to do is talk about what we've learned, as this will be our last episode, as I understand, discussing COVID specifically.
That's correct.
Nick, how'd you like to start off with this topic?
Well, I tried to look back and think about what I learned. First of all, it's not easy to produce something once a week. It requires effort and work. And, I think you and I have put a lot into this, just in terms of research, making sure that we understand what's going on, trying to deliver value. I would pick off with, my first rule of anything, which is always have fun. I used to say this as a coach. If you're not having fun, it's not worth doing. So I've actually really enjoyed it. I hope other people have enjoyed, we've tried to inject a little bit of humor, bring some knowledge and insights. But as I look back, what did I really learn about, the things that went on? And one of the things that I would say is you really can't underestimate resistance. I mean, people have a natural flow. They're always looking to, do the things the way that they always did. And, we just expected people would absorb all of this and say, right, yes, we should do that. But that's not what happened, right?
No, it's been interesting with that. And obviously some of that was due to politics. And this became a political game, not game, I should say, but a political endeavor, much more than a medical one in many ways. And that made it very interesting to watch, as you talked about people accepting or unaccepting of various points of view.
And the other thing that sort of dropped out of that is that I think forcing people is not the way to go. And maybe that's not true in other countries. But here in the United States of America, freedom is a right. It's the Bill of Rights. All of those things sort of contribute. And whilst we would love to mandate things, and based on science and the facts as we understood them, mandates didn't work. In fact, I think worked against us in many instances. And finding a better way to bring people along so that the consensus is, and then, you find that people are following the appropriate behavior.
Yeah, I think that issue then leads to something around behavioral economics. And we saw a bit of that used in terms of trying to get raffles or big winnings for getting your vaccines and things versus mandates. And I agree with you completely. While I was one who originally might have said, man, we need to hammer this baby home, mandate it. Obviously, that's not the right approach. And that would have been a mistake, and was shown to be a mistake in a couple of situations where they tried to do that in a broader context, although it did work within individual groups or things like that.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? We had sort of lottery and, prize winnings and so forth to get vaccinated. Who would have thought?
Right. And along with that, this whole issue of trusted voices and who do you trust? And then, as you've mentioned numerous times, digging even deeper than that.
Right. Yeah, no. So trust is an imperative. And I think it's really important not to break trust. It's one of those things that you get one chance at this. I hope that people have come to trust our voices and trust the insights that we've delivered. And part of generating that trust is to be authentic and honest about opinions. I think we had, I could certainly look back at some of the things that we talked about that I wouldn't say were wrong, but we learned better about. And I'll give you a perfect example. Surfaces. We did a lot of detail on surfaces, how long the virus survived, and it was long standing on metal, I think it was, but your cardboard box, and, this was actually a thing. And at this point, the science is very clear. And that's the thing about science, is it's not linear. It doesn't sort of go, in steady progress. We sort of learn in fits and starts, and it can be, separated in time. And I think it's important to accept that, that opinion was not, it was appropriate at the time. We were doing the best that was, the best available option, as I talk about, is always available. Perfect almost never is. And at the time, that was the right thing. I think what we need to do is to look back now and say, okay, we don't need to have these robots cleaning planes. And to be clear, I actually don't think they're cleaning planes anymore, but they keep saying they are. Doing all this stuff, my gym, my goodness, I couldn't pick up the weights for the gunk that was on them for the spraying down. We don't need that. You can just be regular clean, as it were.
Right. And also another point that you made that I thought was really good was this idea of going deeper and finding the source data.
Yeah, that was one of the critical things that I learned about myself. I mean, I think, social media especially has a tendency to make you a little bit more superficial, retweet. And, they've tried to introduce this irritating notification. Would you like to read that article first? Which is irritating to me because I have read it. That's how I came to this thing. And I don't need you to track my links, but that's a whole separate thing. But no, that's exactly right. Go read the source information to understand what somebody was saying, because what actually appears in the headlines sometimes bears little to no relevance to the actual article and the conclusion that came about from the science.
Yeah, one of your favorite terms that I saw often coming around as we were discussing things on the backside, through our messaging apps was clickbait.
It's really sad, but I have said very clearly to my family that, when they bury me or do whatever they're going to do, I want on my headstone, follow the money. And, what I mean by that is incentive. And in the case of the media, their money is based on your eyeballs and following and people watching. And if you get people to do that, then you're doing your job. That's not the same as transmitting information, knowledge, or indeed science. And there are people whose whole job it is to come up with a headline that grabs you. There's actually a science around this. And I'll be honest, I've tried to use it. I know some of the tricks of the trade, but I try and use it honestly like a scientist.
Sure, that's great. I think as I look back on this thing, early on, surfaces we talked about, but it was aerosolized. People maybe kept that information off a little bit, although they might have known it. And I think that really required us to change our thinking, and on a go-forward basis, change our thinking. And you've talked about hermetically sealed buildings. I mean, HEPA filters, obviously something really worthwhile. Outside air is really worthwhile. And things like that, I think, are things we'll see in the future.
Yeah, I know you're a fan of sci-fi. Every time I used to walk into a building, I'd hear that like you did on Star Trek, but the doors weren't going like this. This was me just trying to pull it open. That's a hermetically sealed building, which is not good for your health. Let's be clear.
Absolutely. And speaking of Star Trek, as Bones might say, it's a virus, Jim, not some made up thing that doesn't exist. And I hope everybody today understands COVID is real. The virus is real. It's out there. It has various impacts on people. We've gotten better because of the vaccines and things, but it's something we still need to watch in the future. And as many have mentioned, there will be other pandemics, and hopefully we've learned some good lessons from this to apply to that.
Yeah, and I hope those people that have come along, listened in, I hope we've provided some useful information, tried to tease out some of the science, and, indeed entertained a little bit as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's really been a great 100 episodes. I've enjoyed the heck out of it. And as you said, it's been fun. It's great work with you, Nick. I know we're going to continue on and do some different topics and things as we go forward each week. But thanks, everyone, for listening. This is Fred Goldstein with Accountable Health. If you'd like more information, please go to accountablehealthllc.com.
And this is Dr. Nick. I'm the Incrementalist here with Incremental Insights for better business, better health.